Okay, continue what we left off. Number 5. How does a Christian's view of the Jewish roots of Christianity affect atheism? We have described briefly the evolution of a hostile attitude toward Jews in the early church. We also discussed the continued existence of the Jews, the refusal to accept Jesus. We are on ongoing aggravation. Excuse me. Both sides of the church claimed that it was the inheritor of God's covenant. Promise that the new Israel, true Israel. In the book of Romans, Paul admonishes the Gentiles regarding such attitude. All of them not to be haughty, nor to forget who supports whom. This is a root that supports the branch, not the verse. Romans 11:8. Okay. Divine orientation. Paul goes further to the Jewish rejection of Jesus was somehow divinely ordained. When Paul says that a temporary blindness has come over the Jews, he meant it is not their doing, but God's. But I believe that the eyes will be opened after a second. Make it sound right up. That the Jews' eyes will be open after the second coming, when we Christians have been called home. And their eyes will open, and they will come to Jesus. Some eyes are already starting to open, which is amazing. Moreover, Paul insisted the Jewish rejection of Jesus was for the Gentiles' benefit, so they could be grafted into the rich Jewish olive tree and share the covenantal relationships with God. I've already mentioned that. That's in Romans 11. We're grafted. Unfortunately, however, as the church becomes increasingly Gentile, its Jewish roots are increasingly denied. All that was remembered from Paul's admonition was that the Jews rejected Jesus. The second half of his statement, that the rejection was divine or attained and for the Gentiles' sake, was tragically forgotten. Romans 11:28 and 29. This replacement theology was not, however, an isolated or unique phenomenon. The early church, in its formative centuries, tended to shape a distinctive Christian identity but denied its Jewish roots. Origin. Consistently, the Jews defined itself over against the Jews. And Judaism. The Jewishness of Jesus, for example, was virtually forgotten. The Jewish order of rituals, concepts such as Passover, baptism, circumcision, and salvation were either denied, spiritualized, or radically transformed in meaning. Christianity has been much like a teenager who rebels against his parents in order to define his own separate identity. The church broke with its Jewish orders and parents and tried to shape a distinctive identity by claiming it's displaced Judaism and supersede the Old Covenant, the Old Testament. Yet encouraging news is that among some Christians there has been a renewal of interest in exploring the Jewish roots of the faith and rediscovering the Jewishness of Jesus. the ministry, the fellowship. Their vision is that the Jews and Christians will reverse a 2,000-year-old history discord and place it with a relationship marked by dialogue, respect, and cooperation. 6. By the end of the 3rd century, the product model of theology symbols were firmly implanted in the Jews. Indeed, arguments have ideas posted by early Christian leaders, just in the first few centuries, forming the Christian's view of Judaism for centuries to come. By the 4th century, John, that's a weird last name, Cyrylsot, oh yeah, I think I spelled that right. For example, declared the martyrs especially hated Jews for the reason they loved so deeply the one who by then was crucified. He explained that Jewish suffering came as a divine punishment because you, Jews, killed Christ. It is because you stretch out your hand against the Lord. It is because you shed the precious blood that there was no restoration, no mercy, nor no defense. This is why you're being punished worse than in the past. If this was not the case, God would not have turned his back upon you so completely. This is who you sin against, him that stated dishonor grace. Who put Jesus on the cross? I don't know what the group. No. He was crucified because to counteract, to take the place of the old Adam who has sinned, that cursed mankind to be in the world of sin. When Jesus came, he came to be a spiritual lamb for us. Not a group of people, but all of us, no matter whom we are. So he was crucified for those who were Jews, Gentiles, atheists, Islamic, Buddhism, whatever. He was crucified for every single one of us. Mainly he was crucified just for us. Maybe it's for us individually, what I'm trying to say. So when I say he was crucified for me. He was crucified individually for you. He shed his blood. It was his Father's will, his will. Nobody caused it. It was just part of the divine plan. Okay. How would I get confused? Think. The average Christian day is, in all likelihood, totally unaware of such statements by outstanding leaders in early church. Unfortunately, such ideas were promulgated and widely accepted during the important formative centuries of the church's development. At the very heart of Christian anti-Semitism was decided charge that as people, Jews killed Jesus, and were doomed to suffer divine wrath retaliatory for that act. If someone kills your son, wrote John, could you stand aside of him on the sound of his greetings? Would you page your stuff together? Would you try to get away from him as if he were an evil demon, as if he was the devil himself? The Jews killed son, your master. You will so dishonor him. As respected his cultive, his murderers, the men who crucified him. Hippolytus and other Christian fathers expressed similar sentiments, saying that the temple was destroyed because they, the Jews, killed the son of the benefactor, God. For he is co-eternal with the Father. Prodenton, a 4th century Christian poet, said the temple was destroyed as a penalty for the murderer for having stained their hands with the blood of Christ. For centuries therefore Christians believe that the Jews, as a nation, rejected crucified Jesus and assumed collective responsibility for his death. They vowed, his blood is upon us and our children. Matthew 27:25. Okay, 7. How does Christian anti-Semitism in the Middle Ages still reverberate today? As we have seen for many centuries, some Christians have maintained that the Jews brought upon themselves and their descendants the divine retribution of eternal wandering and suffering. The destruction of the Jewish temple and exile of the Jewish nation were seen as proof that God had rejected his ancient people as punishment for the crimes of rejecting and crucifying his only begotten Son. Such theological filters, Christians interpreted, accepted Jewish suffering. From such theories of deserving punishment, Christians went on to derive a proof of ministry to the Jews that they were suffering. Society's scapegoat. During the Middle Ages, Christians condemned for the Jews and Judaism brought about the devastating consequences through Jews through Christendom dominated Europe. Christian dominated Europe. Jews remain the only unconverted minority, and their very presence was a source of discomfort to Christians, who regard the church as the New Israel. Jews suffer terribly, persecuted, often mass slaughter from frenzied Christian mobs during the Crusade. During the Inquisition, they were expelled or forced to convert or to die. Jews were compelled to engage in theological disputes with church leaders, which resulted in persecution or forced conversion of the entire Jewish community. There were massive exploitations from Europe land. The Jews were falsely accused of libels. It charged that Jews killed Christian children and used their blood for Passover, Seder. When they drank the water When the drinking water was contaminated, the Jews were to blame for the poisoning of the well. There was the epidemic of typhoid or black plague. It was presumably the Jews' fault. Jews became handy scapegoats for all those ills of society in the medieval Christian Europe. The history of Jews' persecution at the hands of Christians is a significant factor influencing how Jews, even today, perceive Christians and process for the dialogue with them. Defensive mistrust is a starting point for most Jews and their relations with Christians. Christians, on the other hand, are generally not aware of these tragic pages of their history and tend to have different starting points with their relations with Jews. I wasn't aware of it either. I wasn't aware that they were blamed for everything. They would pay scapegoats. 8. Jews encountered anti-Semitism and demonstration in the early decades of the 20th century in the United States too. Though certainly not to the degree of outright persecution they had experienced in Europe, American Jews were excluded, restricted from participating in many areas of society. They were often discriminated against jobs, housing, education, and business. They were proliferated of anti-Jewish propaganda disseminated by groups such as the Klan, and acts of violence against the Jews were not uncommon. American Jews countered these challenges by organizing into groups like the Anti-Defamation League. They fought against all threats of democratic fabric of American life, from the right and left, viewing these threats to Jewish itself and believed that Jews thrive is the best strong democracy Jews have through believing in an American idea. They trust this country and legislative tolerance toward religious minorities. They have felt secure and hopeful in the confession expression by George Washington that America should give to bigotry no sanitation. Okay. The horrors of Holocaust. However, shattered with such optimism and security that pervaded American Jewry, our shared worldview has been radically altered towards the negativity by that CATACLYSMIC event. The Holocaust brought into sharp focus the entire question of the Christian-Jewish relationship. The stereotypes promoting contempt toward Jews from the Nazi drew. They were rooted in the views held by the church for centuries. The Holocaust took place in the very heartland of enlightened Christian Europe. Pro-Nazi leadership was often in the hands of baptizing Christians, with some exception. The Christian church was essential, silent, and demonstrative passive acquaintances. The monstrous crime of genocide was committed by baptized Catholics, Protestants, and Orthodox Christians. It is true that many factors contributed to the outbreak of the Holocaust, but certainly one contributing factor was a long tradition of Christian contempt for and persecution of the Jews, which by the 20th century was deeply ingrained into the minds of the European Christians. The Holocaust did not erupt in a vacuum, but it built upon the past centuries of Christian anticipation toward antipathy toward Jews, and planted the seed bed which the germ of the Nazi anti-Semitism grew as ideology nourishment. And the evil design that the Nazis were able to gain moral and theological support from traditional Jew views, traditional Christian views of Jews and Judaism. The Holocaust of the Jews would have been unlikely, if not unthinkable, without almost 2,000 history of Christian hatred and hostility. 9. In recent years, this is how do Christians respond to anti-Semitism? Part 1. In recent years, Jews have made a tremendous stride in fostering better relationships with Christians and in fighting anti-Semitism. Here in America, nevertheless, the problem continues to plague us today. At times overly, and is a force constantly working beneath the surface of the Western culture, vulnerable and violent eruption, if given the right political, social, and economic conditions. Of concern to us now is the question of how Christians participate, particularly evangelical Christians, to respond to the challenge of anti-Semitism. A few years ago, the prominent evangelical magazine Christianity Today during almost its entire issue the subject of Jews and evangelicals. Let me quote a brief from a column by Dr. Vern Grounds, President Emeritus of Denver Conservative Baptist Theology Seminary in Colorado. He wrote, "Evangelicals are rightly exhorted to ponder the heartbreaking pages of Israel's tragic saga. Realize that it is Christianity which is at the bottom has been either primary or at the rate broadly responsible for centuries. Persecutions that reach its manner in the ghastly situation of the Jewish problem. These are very strong, compelling remarks. Confessing and repenting." The editor of the same issue noted that, on a whole, evangelical tends to stop off, suggesting that they are anti-Semitic. They admit that nominal Christians, particularly medieval Catholics and members of the liberal church of modern Germany, were anti-Semitic. But evangelicals stand opposed to this. I used to believe it was the Catholics that caused him. Beyond that, however, we must confess that Luther and Reformers and many evangelical Protestants since then have made a statement that Jews certainly have the right to consider anti-Semitic. We regret that these anti-Semites of the past and present clearly the spirit of recognition and repentance are essential for Christians. The editors also point out that they detected a spirit of repentance among evangelicals, repentance without institution like faith, works without word is useless. And 10, the final one. How Christians respond to it in part 2. That editorial, which appeared in the 1979 issue, an estimate of many marked a major turning point in evangelical-Jewish relations. Citing from the same editor, there are 6 ways that the editor urged born-again Christians to respond to anti-Semitism, which are: 1. It's important that we're guilty Christians publicly acknowledge past anti-Semitism and declare to be sin. If evangelicals are unwilling to set the record straight in this matter, any malady or repentance is highly suspected. 2. Evangelical leaders must avoid any direct, indirect support for anti-Semitic causes. We believe evangelicals pass this test very well. 3. It is enough to condemn anti-Semitism in the past, remain alone from anti-Semitic causes. Evangelical leaders and pastors must use their teaching ministries to present a solid instruction as to the anti-Bible and anti-Christian nature of all anti-Semitic attitudes for action. 4. Further, evangelical leaders must ferret out, expose, and actively oppose overt anti-Semitism that creeps into our society and structures for centuries alone. Anti-Semitic lines: Hitler did not rise in a cultural vacuum. His persecution of the Jews was the end product of a long history of anti-Semitism, in which Allies evangelicals to play an integral part in that of Semitism that lead to a gross anti-Semitism which may terminate in genocide. So evangelists must root out even the inner form thinking are harmless. Just a thought about Hitler. When Hitler was a boy, he was drowning, and God saved him. Now, if he was not saved, do you think his parents would have another child and raised him the way they would have raised him? And would that child become Hitler? By a different name? Something like that. 5. Evangelicals must guard against the unconscious anti-Semitism in themselves that lies concealed in the structure of society. Jews naturally are more sensitive to this. Can help evangelicals hereby forthright pointing out such attitudes. In a public school, English teacher was democrat and still prejudiced for life by his treatment of Shylock and Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice. As evangelists demonstrate in tangible ways the inherence of anti-Semitic actions, they would declare a crucial truth to the Gentile world at large. To attack Jews is to attack evangelicals, and such attack will be resisted by evangelicals as attack against themselves. We strongly believe that Christians today must help stem the tide of anti-Semitism and show retribution, if you will, by educating themselves about the Jewish roots of Christianity, extending love and compassion of a needy persecution Jewish brothers and sisters, and supporting Israel and the struggle to survive. That's it. This little booklet is by the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews thing, and they have some websites on the back. On Eagle's Wings, Garden of Israel, Isaiah 58, and Stanford, Israel. They also have the website for for International Fellowship for Jews and Christians, which is ifcj.org, as ifcj.org. And you can even call them. You can even call them at 1-800-486-8844. And the number is 1-800-486-8844. Have you visited the website? And I hope this booklet was a little, up your eyes a little bit. Okay, thank you.